Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Asad Lalji. Welcome to our Avid Online live session. And for those joining us for the first time, a special welcome. Please refer to the chat box for more information on Avid Learning and our partners for this evening. Avid Online was launched on the 1st of April 2020 as a direct response to the pandemic. So we are now over 15 months young, and approximately 260 programs later, we can say that although 2020 and 2021 challenged us in unprecedented ways, we continue to champion and bring to our audiences the best of arts and culture and stay true to our mantra that learning never stops. We at Avid Learning believe in the power of film as an art form, not just to entertain, but to create social impact. And we strive to leverage filmmaking as a technology for education, further learning, and social change. Over the past 11 years, it has been our endeavor to provide a creative platform for filmmakers to present a rich mix of film programming designed to build and support the growing interest in this industry, cultivate an audience, as well as support the next generation of filmmakers. The impetus, or as I'd like to think, the inspiration of this evening session was threefold. A book, Changemakers, 20 Women Transforming Bollywood from Behind the Scenes by Gayatri Rangachari Shah and Malika Kapoor. These authors tell a story of 20 incredible women. Many of them had no prior connections to the industry, who have carved a successful niche for themselves despite the significant challenges. Good Pitch India and Sophie, who has been a long-time collaborator's introduction to a director of an interesting project on the Women in Cinema Collective in Kerala. And of course, our even longer time collaborators and friends at the US Consulate General in Mumbai on the announcement of a grant on promoting gender equality by addressing the gender disparities in popular Indian films and the film industry. So this brings us to our evening session. The US Consulate General Mumbai and Avid Learning present Lights, Camera, and Action for Gender Equality, a panel discussion on gender equality in film and media, the role of women in gender-defying roles in the film industry, and the shifts of entertainment norms. But before I begin and introduce our wonderful panel, it is my pleasure to welcome Yoon Nam, Culture Attaché at the US Consulate General Mumbai, to tell us more about this very important initiative. Over to you, Yoon.
Thanks, Asad. Good evening, everyone. I'm Yoon Nam, as was just mentioned, and I'm the cultural attaché at the U.S. Consulate General here in Mumbai. It's a real pleasure and honor to be here among this distinguished panel tonight, and of course, with all of you in the audience. We at the consulate are thrilled to be part of this discussion, Lights, Camera, and Action for Gender Equality, because promoting gender equality is at the heart of what the U.S. is trying to do here in India. And here in Mumbai, specifically, the consulate has often used film as an integral part of our gender equality work. To give just one example of what we've done in this space, starting in 2013, we conducted an annual short film festival, encouraging filmmakers to produce short films that promote women's empowerment and combat gender-based violence. The festival had a run of 6 years, during which hundreds of filmmakers showcased their short films, which were viewed, of course, by thousands of viewers all across India. We like to use film to amplify messages around gender equality because of its unique ability to elicit empathy and understanding on a massive scale. But as much as it can change mindsets in a positive direction, of course, the opposite is possible. Looking at the film industry in the United States, research from the Gina Davis Institute on Gender and Media shows that in films, there are only 1/3 as many women on screen as men. For every 2.3 men on screen in a film, there's 1 woman. This holds true for leading characters, supporting characters, and bizarrely, even non-speaking background characters in crowd scenes. Perhaps even worse, in the top grossing Hollywood films, released between 2007 and 2016, 26% of female characters were scantily clad, compared to 6% of men. And an additional 26% of female characters got partially or fully naked, compared to only 9% of men, meaning that roughly 51% of the time that you saw a female character on screen, she was in a state of full or partial undress. One can only imagine the impact such gender inequality on screen can shape social norms, either consciously or subconsciously. And why does this on-screen gender imbalance persist? Surely there are many factors, but one of the most obvious is the gender imbalance behind the camera. Several studies have found that in India, only 1 in 10 directors are women. And I've done a little digging around to look at the US numbers, and they are even worse. So to analyze and address the issue here in India, the US consulate is funding a project called Promoting Gender Equality by Addressing Gender Disparities in Popular Indian Films and the Film Industry. The project includes a study to quantitatively assess gender balance in popular Bollywood films and also gender balance behind the camera. It also entails an impact campaign with the goal of making real change. Months ago, when Asad and I had our discussion about organizing tonight's event, I told him that we would launch the project here. Sadly, the timeline has been prolonged a little bit, so we're not ready to do that just yet, but expect to hear more about this soon. Fortunately, the rest of the concept has been executed beautifully by the Avid team, and I'm sure all of you are as excited as I am to hear from our amazing panelists. So thank you, Avid Learning, and back to you, Asad.
Thank you, Yoon, for those opening remarks, those statistics. They are, I'm sure the panel will go more into it in detail. But so to the task at hand, lights, camera, and action for gender equality. A warm virtual welcome to our panel of experts, honorary doctorate, national award-winning director and producer, Vibha Bakshi, actor, director, and philanthropist, Rahul Bose, award-winning documentary filmmaker, Miriam Chandy Menacheri, and they will be in conversation with film critic, festival programmer, Udita Junjunwala. For more about these experts, please refer to their bios that have been posted in the chat section. They should have been emailed to you also earlier. These esteemed change makers from the world of media and entertainment will speak about the changing roles of gender in media. They will speak on achieving equal representation of women in media and film on and off screen, and will examine this from even a global standpoint. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Udita for her opening remarks. But please note the session is 75 minutes. It will be followed by a 15-minute Q&A. Please start pasting your questions. I see they've already started coming, so that's very, very encouraging in the Q&A box. And look forward to a fascinating session. Thank you so much for tuning in. Udita?
Thank you, Yoon, and thank you, Asad, very much. And welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining in on this wet and rainy day. At least where we are, it's wet and rainy. I'm delighted that I'm getting this opportunity, and it's only because, unfortunately, Malika couldn't be here, and I wish she was, because it's a tough chair to fill. But anyway, here we are to talk about what actually Yoon took away a lot of my script. So I'm going to wing it now. But you know, the fact of the matter is, he mentioned the Gina Davis Institute, and I wanted to start off by quoting her as well. She's the founder and chair of the Gina Davis Institute, which she once said that in the time that it takes to make a movie, we can change what the future looks like. There are woefully few women CEOs in the world, but there can be lots of them on screen. I think this is really the gist of what we're trying to achieve and talk about, which is that female characters in films motivate women to be more ambitious, more successful, and the more role models we have, the more visual representations we have, the more women in society and men in society will begin to understand changing societal fabric and equality. There is a research that was done, very interestingly, it's a bit dated now, it was done in 2016, But it was a global research project by the Gina Davis Institute on Gender and Media, along with the J. Walter Thompson Company, which found that the female role models in film and television are hugely influential in driving women to improve their lives. The research found that 90% of women globally feel that female role models in film or TV are important. 61% said female role models in film and TV have been influential in their lives. And 58% said that women have been inspired to be more ambitious or assertive. 53% of women globally think there is a lack of female role models in film and TV. And of the female characters with a job, less than 25% of employed characters were female, while women make up 40% of the global workforce. So that, I mean, I don't mean to throw so many stats, but this is just really to sort of encapsulate where we were at least in 2016. If we can have the presentation, please. In 1995, as this says, the United Nations in the Beijing Fourth World Congress set up these objectives, which you can see on the slide. It basically said that representations of women have to be improved. 20 years later, when they went back to the study, they realized that the representation of women and girls within the media as a whole had made limited progress. Though the proportion of female news subjects represented or portrayed has risen in some occupational categories, overall, it was still very underrepresented. So here we go. So this is based on Indian data, right? 6% share of films out of 129 across 5 languages. That's Hindi and the 4 South Indian languages were directed by women. 8% share of women heads of departments were women, out of which production design had the most, and cinematography had 2% females. In Bollywood, the ratio of HODs is 16% compared to 1% in South Indian films. I'm sure Miriam will have more to say about this when we come to the discussion. So this report, and there's another study which says that only around 5% of directors in India are female. In another study, which is analyzing gender stereotyping in Bollywood movies, analyzed 4,000 films released between 1970 and 2017, and found that on-screen time for females was just 31.5% compared to 68.5% of time for male actors. So while there has been a strong movement in Hollywood and India to change the narrative and to challenge the status quo over the last few years with Me Too, Time's Up, the movement in Kerala, there's the India Women Rising initiative now out in Bollywood. There are writers' rooms which are seeing more of a mix of men and women. The short film and online content has opened up a world of opportunities. Technology is democratizing filmmaking techniques. We still call them women filmmakers, but we don't refer to the men as male filmmakers. I mean, this is just, these are the sort of subliminal messages that we really need to tackle. As Sheryl Sandberg, who we all admire, says, taking initiative pays off. It's hard to visualize someone as a leader if she's always waiting to be told what to do. And I'm so glad we have the panel we do, because these are not people who are waiting to be told what to do at all. And I'm going to jump right in by starting my questions to them. I'm going to start actually with Vibha. I think that each of these filmmakers has such an incredibly rich body of work that it would be wonderful if you could all just share a little bit about what you've done. Vibha, if I can come to you first. Hi, how are you?
Very good.
I want to start by asking you, because you've made, Daughters of Mother India and Sunrise, 2 very powerful documentaries. Is it a coincidence that both of them tackle gender inequality?
Well, Udita, as even your presentation says, when we're talking about gender injustice or gender inequality, it is a global reality. And, my journey to make documentaries which were focused on this started in New York when I did the United States government film to stop violence against women. It was part of the Emmy Award-winning campaign. And what I realized is, yes, it is very much a global reality. Many years later, when I did my 2 films out of India, Daughters of Mother India and Sunrise, you just realize how powerful a film can be to activate movements of change. And, really the question comes to, how are we tackling this narrative? I remember coming to India just about the time when Nirbhaya's brutal gang rape and murder happened. And at that time, as I watched the revolution unfold in India, I stood there as a very proud daughter of India, because I believe maybe no other country in the world has reacted to a gender crime the way India did. And Daughters of Mother India became a cry of my conscience. It focuses on how did India change after the rape and murder of Nirbhaya. The focus was the police, because unless the police is not gender sensitized, justice will not only be delayed, it will be denied. And so a lot happened between thinking about the film and gaining access, but we were the only team to gain access to the Delhi police right after the rape and murder of Nirbhaya. Well, the film got completed, the film won the National Film Award, but most importantly, the film was screened for 150,000 police officers across India to gender sensitize the force. And really, it comes down to how do we control this narrative in film? I had access to the rapists. I had access to a hell of a lot, between rape and police. It's a very deadly combination, but it is what you decide to showcase to empower others. And it was during my journey when I was screening for the police, I reached Haryana. And it is in Haryana when I found out that there is a farmer who, in an arranged marriage, married a gang rape survivor. And I went in search of that farmer. And when I met him, he said, the shame is not hers, it's ours. And I knew I had found my sunrise hero. Sunrise is SONRISE. And it's really about showcasing the right examples, to give hope to people, because without hope, no fight can be won. And the fight for gender equality, the fight for gender justice is a fight that we cannot afford to lose.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to come back, Vibha, to talk more about this. But Miriam, I'm going to come to you for now. Do you believe the film industry has been successful in depicting women's issues accurately through cinema?
So I'm an avid film lover. I watch fiction and documentary, and I'm a film student as well. So I see two very different worlds. I think in the world of documentary, somehow women have had more narrative powers. They have been very much more involved. I ask myself if that's a question about financing, and the fact that documentary does have less financing, and therefore, it actually allows for women to participate, because it's sort of driven by passion and the need to tell a story. And the minute there are big budgets involved, somehow there are these formulas of what works in the box office. The decision makers are people who are not willing to take a risk on women telling their own stories, women calling the shots in many ways. And what I'm doing a study in the film industry in South India and the Women Cinema Collective over there. And what I've really noticed is that right from the beginning, it's not that women have not been involved. Even when they have been involved, it's almost an erasure of their contributions, whether they were technicians, whether they were producers of some of the biggest stars. You really need to dig deep to even find these stories. So really my challenge now is to relook cinema and tell her story that rather than his story, because her story does exist. It's not that a women's collective came into being overnight. It has been many people who kind of paved the way for it to happen now, from the technical field to the storytellers themselves. And I think the time has come where people are seeing that it is viable. We are half the population and our stories are important. So I see it as a sort of historic turning point.
Right. Thank you. Rahul, you're sort of on this panel, you're sort of the bridge. You're on the cusp of sort of connecting us to the Bollywood, to the mainstream as well. You're also an actor and filmmaker, as we know, and you have your foundation. I want to understand, because we were talking about this earlier, there's a very important sort of thing these days, sort of understanding perhaps that we're coming to these days about the importance of the gaze. And I was thinking about this, that, how we view a film. Even if I'm watching a film, when I watch a female character being stalked, or when I see a Kabir Singh, sort of violence as love kind of portrayal, and we accept it as some sort of a romance, are we able to sort of distinguish where the misogyny begins and ends? So my question to you really is that when you, as an actor or as a director, are choosing your scripts, is the gaze an important consideration for you?
You mean not is the gaze, but what is the gaze, right? I carry everything that I own ideologically in my life into every corner of my being. Whether I'm playing rugby, whether I'm on the board of Indian Rugby and we're looking at the next camp for under 18 girls, or when we're looking at what we can do with the in HEAL in terms of child sexual abuse survivors who are girls or boys in this case, or whether it is when I am making a movie. So the basket of values that I hold very dear to me are that gaze will never ever shift, whether I'm choosing a film to do as an actor or whether I'm choosing to make a film. I might be slightly less rigorous if I'm choosing a film. My rigor will still extend to what is the overall message of the film. I might not sweat about does it pass the Bechdel test, for example. But when I'm making a film, and Purna and Everybody Says I'm Fine are two examples of it, I'm incredibly aware that I should, at every single moment of my life, through this movie, be in harmony with the rest of my soul. This movie is not something outside of my soul. In fact, it's such hard work that any movie that I make, I think, will emanate from the center of my soul. So for me, the values that I hold very close: compassion, non-violence, equality, and I don't mean equality frivolously, as in, why can't we all be equal? I'm a believer in reservations, for example. I'm a believer in equity, not equality. So it's all of these values that I hold very dear. I will not, as a filmmaker, expound or mansplain on a topic that I don't know or that I know too little about, like caste, for example. I know enough to talk to you, and you and I can have a conversation over dinner, but can I make a movie about it? Absolutely not. There are better people who can make movies about that. So in that respect, while I'm careful to be rigorous about the values I hold, I don't aggrandize myself and say, oh, but it cannot be this and it cannot be that, because, I know exactly what I hold very close, what I know very well, what's in the marrow of my bones, and I don't compromise on that.
Right. Thank you. Miriam and Vibha, because you both are non-fiction documentary filmmakers, there are different considerations when it comes to putting a project together. A lot of it, from my understanding, is it's a labor of love, and you don't have to be at the mercy of production houses and studios and so on. What are some of the challenges then that you have faced, both of you, as filmmakers, and I'm not going to say women filmmakers, but as filmmakers who are working in the documentary space? Does gender play a part? Does it figure somewhere when you're out there in the field or putting together a team or looking for exhibition and distribution?
I think, as you rightly said, it's not about the production and, production houses. But I think what Rahul said makes a lot of sense, which is, as a documentary filmmaker, you can control the narrative. So, I remember when, I was shooting Sunrise, I am shooting it in Haryana. You know, it's India's seat of patriarchy. And as a woman, to have questioned the patriarchs there was the most difficult thing that I have done. And I think it also comes down, which Miriam will totally resonate with, it's access. You know, as a woman filmmaker, to have entered into India's seat of patriarchy, to question the men, and yet come out with a film where they become the biggest cheerleaders for us was something that we could have never ever imagined. And I think it comes down to how we choose to do it. And you know, I say this again and again, it's very easy to sensationalize an issue, but very hard to sensitize. And as documentary filmmakers, the hope is, you know, it's not just about accolades, but it's about, you know, seeing the movements of change on the ground, to see the impact. And in the case of Sunrise, when I entered, the biggest cup leader of India, you know, the patriarch of 1,500 villages, when I interviewed him, he said, there is no place for women here. Today, the same cup leader is screening Sunrise across all villages in Haryana. And now it comes down to, again, how do we treat the film? You know, Sunrise could have been a very different film where I could have focused on honor killings and I could have focused on, you know, everything that was going wrong. Instead, I focused on those handful of gender right heroes who are breaking the shackles of patriarchy. And what has unleashed after that is unimaginable, simply because as a team, we were very, very clear that this film is not just about ratings and awards, but it is to see the impact on the ground. And I proudly today say that the film has not only won the National Film Awards for Best Film and Best Editing, but it has been selected by the United Nations to be showcased across 71 priority countries for the global he for she movement. So when you handle a documentary sensitively, the viewers will pick up on it, because that's all we can cling on to. There are no commercial gains in documentaries.
Miriam, do you agree?
Yes, I agree. And I think my journey has been a little different than Vibha's. I came from a news space where I worked in a news bureau, and it's very different when you kind of go in and you're, you know, chasing the headlines. And I made a conscious decision to move away from that. And like Vibha said, you know, you're looking for perspective. You're looking to kind of dive deep. And I would disagree that, you know, it's not about finances. I now spend the most recent documentary I've been working on, I've been working 5 years.
Yeah.
So when I say I give 5 years of my time and my life, literally, I think the language of documentary is empathy. The currency of documentary is empathy. You enter a world and you invest to listen, and to listen really hard. And I do believe that women filmmakers in this space have a wonderful ability to empathize and to listen really hard. And therefore, to bring alive what Rahul said in a way, even when you enter other worlds that may not be so familiar to you, if you listen really hard and you can empathize really hard, you can bring that world alive. It's a bit like people write novels or fiction or whatever it is, that when you do kind of deep dive. So I would say that I do work with very big budgets. In fact, I would compare my documentary budgets to some of the fiction budgets that are made. But the problem is that documentary filmmakers are wearing like 5 or 6 hats. Yeah. It's not like a world where you have a producer who's raising the money and the director concentrates on the creative aspect, or you're kind of juggling all these hats and still trying to also build this audience. And the really heartening thing about it is that more and more the audience has become genre agnostic. When I show my films to the youth, I'm really surprised how many of them have seen these documentaries. They're referencing these documentaries, and a lot of other women filmmakers who I admire and who I see have made fabulous films. They're referencing those films as well. So I see that sort of this world of fiction and factual films in that sense. There is this sort of very interesting area where it's more, what is the narrative that you're saying? What is it? What is new and fresh and compelling about it that draws an audience to it? Because also the kind of platforms that these films are showing on, it's no longer the same. It's accessible to everybody.
Correct.
So yeah, so I think it's very challenging time for any filmmaker to kind of bridge all these platforms and kind of discern the kind of narrative that they want to say. But it is about freshness and a new perspective, and yeah.
And I agree with with Miriam, with Rahul. Films per se are such a powerful medium to bring about any kind of change. And I think all of us, whether we are actors or directors or producers, we carry that responsibility. But then again, it comes from within. It's what your decisions are and how you want to control that narrative.
I think, I mean, this is the point, right? When we look at gender inequality, we have to look at it in its sort of most mass form, which is the popular cinema, and which is really the one that's influencing the people. So is it that we are perpetuating stereotypes and patriarchy that has existed for generations, or is film going to be able to champion the change that we need to see? And there are the women who work behind the camera who can influence it, but there are also men who work behind the camera that can influence it. So what do you think are the issues? Do we feel like we are making strides in the right direction? Rahul, I'd like to start with you on this. Do you think that we have there is an improvement? Is there more equality coming in terms of narrative, storytelling, and in the women that we see working behind the scenes? Is there a greater number of women that we see working behind the scenes?
The question that demands a very long answer, but I'll make it as short as possible. Of course, strides have been made, but it's like what you read in the newspapers. There are 3 great stories and 2 horrific stories, right? Strides are being made. Are they being made quick enough? I definitely don't think so. Are they always being made in the right direction? Perhaps, sometimes, perhaps not. Do we go 2 steps forward and 1 step back, or 1 step forward and 2 steps back? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Just when you think you've left the misogynistic boy violently harassing a woman till she, for some odd reason, finds it very seductive and falls in love with him. Have we left that behind? Just when we feel we have, we haven't. So I think that it's definitely improving. I can think of a couple of mainstream films where actually the woman drives the film, which is so rare. I can think of a couple of films that are being made right now where, again, the woman drives the film, and that's rare. As far as women working behind the camera, of course, not enough. My God, not enough, nowhere near enough. I don't need to hear the 8% statistic to know that. What are the reasons for that? Too complex, too multi-tiered, too variable from different geographies and different cultures to come to a generalization. So I won't even attempt to dissect that on this program. But do I see more women on set? Probably not. Probably not. Do I see more DOPs? Do I see more heads of costume? I made Everybody Says I'm Fine 20 years ago, and my crew was, barring 2 men, my crew was female. My DOP was male, but my costume designer, my production designer, they were all female. Have I seen anything like that in the recent past? Probably not. So I can't say things are galloping in terms of improvement behind the camera. Just one thing that you said earlier on, Udita, which was, films that show women more. And I just wanted to say, I think what you meant, I hope, is it also depends on what kind of women you're seeing. You could have a film showing 6 women and yet not take one step towards empowerment of women as a gender, or in any search for any kind of equity. So I think that it's also important to note what is that woman portraying and what is the takeaway from the movie finally, which is the disturbing part of some of the movies we've seen recently, which have a distinctly misogynistic slant, where what is being taken away is possibly not, doesn't justify all the violence. And I mean, I keep saying, to talk against rape in a fiction piece, you have to show the rape. I mean, even if you do it in a way that Bandit Queen did, all the same, the horror of that has to course through your consciousness as an audience for you then to understand what happens after. But if the takeaway after is, you know what, it's okay, she asked for it, or, I can somewhere justify that kind of violence, then it's a problem. So I think it's very, very important to focus on what kind of roles women are being given, not heroic roles, but roles that if you flipped it. And when I'm writing a new film right now, and I was accused a few days ago of writing one of the roles. There are many women in the film of a stereotype, very stereotypical. So I flipped it and I asked the question to the person who was criticizing me. I said, does it work as a man? She said, yes, it does. I said, then, so if you flip it and it still works, well, that's fine. But if you flip it and you find, oh God, no, a male character would not be this. It's just, this is unreal. Then you have a problem.
Yeah, can I?
Go ahead, Miriam.
Yeah, so I just wanted to add to the question you asked, Rahul, because what you see in the Women in Cinema Collective is really interesting. Firstly, the sort of a cross-section of women in the Malayalam film industry. And it's interesting to note that the biggest blockbuster that came out from there was directed by a woman, Anjali Menon, called Bangalore Days.
Yeah,
so in many ways, the script is being rewritten. As for women technicians, there is the Indian Women Cinematographers Collective that was formed by Fauzia Fatima. It has almost 100 members already, women cinematographers, and these are not just women working in the Malayalam film industry, but across India. And the fact that they are there to compare notes, it's very interesting that cinema as a workspace itself is not equitable. They have complaints that if there was a time where you could not go to a women's loo, there was not a toilet available on the set. So the fact that, you don't have to wait for a Me Too moment to realize that this is a space that's so skewed as a workspace. It's a workspace at the end of the day. If we look at it simply as a workspace with labor laws that work for everybody, it would actually be quite simplified. And I do see the sort of the thrust that a collective having been formed, the fact some of these common issues which maybe individuals were struggling with in each of their sets or on each of their films is now kind of being put on the table and it's being addressed. And another interesting thing I noticed is that they lobbied for film financing for 2 new women directors in Kerala, and that did get greenlit. And therefore, the state is financing 2 women-led films this year. That's actually gone on the floors during the pandemic. And I see all these as wonderful, great signs.
You've all mentioned, I mean, Rahul particularly mentioned films that he could think of. Can you think of films that you feel have got it right recently or have got it terribly wrong?
Udita, I also want to complete the conversation that Rahul was talking about, which is depiction, right? So you can have all these women, many women in the film, but if they're depicted in a way that doesn't do justice, we've done nothing about the film. And really, Udita, you've seen it with Sunrise, because Udita and I have been screening Sunrise across schools. which is how are we depicting the men? What is the true essence of masculinity? Right? So, like Udita, you mentioned, a Kabir saying, or there are many such, which, it's the so-called macho men, but it's wrong on every front. So, I mean, again, it is, with Sunrise, we took a conscious decision to talk to the men, because when we talk about gender rights and gender justice, women are getting it, but it's very important to make men a part of this conversation so that they are very much part of the movement. And instead, we focused on these ordinary men from Haryana who've taken on the extraordinary fight to break the shackles of patriarchy. And we have seen how this is playing out. When we talk about, when you see boys of 13, 14, 15 watching these men, and when we say these are the real heroes, this can have a huge impact on this very, very critical generation that may break that cycle. And so, when we are talking about films, it's again coming about the depiction of our hero or heroines, whether it's fiction or non-fiction. It's how do we do it? And not only emphasizing on the women, on how they're depicted, the time has come also how we depict the men correctly. Because so many people do not even have role models on what is the true essence of masculinity.
Yeah. So actually, this is something that all three of you please chip in on. Do you think it is more than productive and beneficial to make men part of the solution?
Oh, absolutely. That has been, I'm working very closely now with the United Nations and with the headquarters in New York. And unless men do not become part of the movement, it's going to be a very long, drawn out fight for justice. But again, it does not have to be done by shaming men. It's not men versus women, but to create a bold and united force for equality. And that is why, with Sunrise, we didn't focus on those who were not doing the right thing. Instead, we focused on those who were breaking the shackles of patriarchy.
Miriam?
Yes, I totally agree. There is no solution unless everyone is involved. And I think that even these women who have come this far, they got their first job as a DOP or as an editor on productions where there were progressive men who found a place for them. So they are definitely part of the movement. And I think even when the WCC was formed, there were a whole set of, it was literally a split in the industry, I think, and there was camps that were formed, and there were a lot of men who were firm supporters and believed that the time has come for a movement like this.
Absolutely.
So.
Rahul, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I've been working on this for 10 years, so I mean, it's a no-brainer. The only thing I keep telling people is that we have to raise our boys better, and the only way to do that is you cannot now tell your boys what to do. That time is gone. You're going to have to show them what to do without telling them anything. So if a boy sees his father walking into VT station 3 steps ahead of his mother as they go to catch the Dehradun Express to Dehradun, then you can be sure that that boy, when he grows up, will be walking into the station 3 steps ahead of his wife. So, look, that this is not the subject of discussion here, but I can go on and on about it. But short answer is, of course, it's a no-brainer.
Right. Yeah. To come back to my earlier question, any references from popular culture, any examples that you can think of where you think that the films or shows either got it right or got it very wrong?
So there was a controversy in Kerala where Parvati, who is a well-known actress now both in Bollywood as well as in Mollywood, she pulled up a leading actor for doing this role in this film called Kasba, where he's a police. He doesn't salute his superior, who is a woman, and then when she questions him, saying, "I'm your superior. How come you didn't salute me?" He says, I don't have to salute you, but I can make you miss your menstrual cycle. So Parvati, yeah. So Parvati took. I mean, she's a young actress, a feisty actress who actually took him up on this, and it became a huge controversy. And his entire fan club attacked her, like literally rape threats. I think it's all of this abuse and posturing actually has moved online, which is another whole facet to this kind of dismantling of this narrative, because they're all faceless people and it's much easier to kind of go after someone you want to attack. So
So Udita, I don't know whether you're going to get to that point where I shared something with you before the show.
Yes.
About what had happened with me as a director.
Yes.
Or should I jump in with it right now? Because it's a very interesting story.
Yes, please do jump in.
And this will also take the discussion to a very interesting place.
Yes.
Yeah, so I got a call from a producer to direct a show, to show, run and direct 10 episodes, the entire season, in fact, of a show that contained predominantly women and dealt with women issues, and men were part of their lives, but not. These women drove the entire story. The scripts had been written. I made a lot of suggestions. We worked on 3 weeks on what should the new scenes look like, what sounds a bit hokey, what sounds a bit fake, etc., etc. What you would do anyway. Anyway, long story short, the OTT channel, it's one of the biggest channels in the world, turned around and said, the notes are great. I mean, it's definitely sounding better, reading better, all of that, but he can't direct the series. So the producer said, why? He said, because he's not a woman. So they said, look, he's made Purna. If you've seen Purna, you'll understand that this guy is not, a male director or a female. He's just, he's right there, the kind of person we want. We believe he'll be, the right person to handle the subject like this. They said, whether he is right or not, we can't hire him because he's a man, and the optics will be wrong. That something like this must be directed by a woman. Now, here's the thing, Udita. I actually agree with that. I think when there are centuries of injustice to any one group of peoples in the world, indigenous, whatever you're talking about, to rectify those wrongs, you have to have representation. You have to have enforced, whether it's apartheid and the post-apartheid representation, whichever way you look at it. Which is why I said I'm in favor of reservations if one was talking about that. Because to get to a point which is equitable, you're going to have to give a leg higher than, you can't just say, let's all treat everybody equally now. No, you have to rectify, start to treat, let the pendulum swing in the other direction. Till you start seeing, women in that proportion that you desire. And then you can say, okay, now we can chill out. It's very much like parliament representation. You're going to have to set a line, draw a line and say, we have to have 1/3 or half or whatever it is, and make sure it happens with, there are not enough female politicians. Well, it's the chicken and egg. There won't be if you don't get them to be. So I was actually in favor of this decision to say that, yes, you're absolutely right. You have to push for women to, to helm more projects. And if not a project like this, then what? The counter argument is, come on, cinema is, gender agnostic when you're making it. The lady who made Zero Dark 30 was a lady, Catherine something, I forget.
Catherine Bigelow, yeah.
Right, Catherine Bigelow. So, but I don't want to even get into that. I'm saying historical wrongs have to be righted with a sense of equity and a sense of a greater leg up than just saying, okay, fine, we are back to equality. Nothing happened. But what about, all the inequality that's caused so much of damage and, internally and chronically in a society that needs to be actively addressed. So, if you look at the Afro-American leaders who led the civil rights movement in the 60s, it was a strong move to say this and more has to be done. Otherwise, it will not be enough. Sorry. So that was the it's very interesting in this day and age to hear this story, and it happened to me, so it's not gossip, because I think that's more power to that. And
Right.
there will come a time when you don't need to do that anymore.
And it's very interesting. Do you think this is because with the digital platforms, with OTT platforms and so on, there's more scope now to do this, because you don't have those sort of conventional conservative constraints of theatrical release, box office pressures, where you would consider whether a female can open a film, what are the, there were these perceptions of what an audience was looking for, what would draw them into the first day, first show, or weekend collections. But with, streaming services, there seems to be a far more sort of there seems more democratization in a way. I can see Miriam's films, for example, on Netflix, for instance.
Udita, it's very simple to understand. It's very simple, because when I'm watching something on an online streaming platform, I'm comparing it to 13 other things I've seen in the last 13 days. Narcos, a Malayalam film, something from Iran, etc., etc. So if it's not written well, it's not acted well, you can be the biggest superstar in the world, I'm not interested, right? So that psychology of viewing in the audience, as opposed to I paid $1,000, I'm at PVR, I'm watching this film, okay, it's not great, but let's just ride it out because the seat is great and the popcorn's warm and everything is great. And, I can make this happen. And the sound is thumping in my ears and I'm waiting for that song. There are different reasons why you stay on. OTT, there are none of those reasons. So, and unlike television in the past, where you could have switched the TV off, here you can switch to something better. It's just the writing and the acting that you're interested in.
But I'm talking about from the perspective of women creators or content creators. Writers' rooms have so many more women in them now.
Right.
Right. I mean, so do you, as non-fiction filmmakers have struggled very often with distribution. Do you feel that these platforms are helping you get your films seen?
Are you asking me that question?
No, Miriam and Vibha,
the
non-fiction filmmakers.
Yeah.
Unmute, please.
Yeah, I've just seen whether it's fiction, what Rahul was saying, it can be a great star cast. If the film doesn't work, it doesn't work, right? I think the same thing is happening with documentaries. If the film is good, it will withstand any storm that's coming its way. And yes, OTT is a bonus. All our films have then finally gone on Netflix and the different OTT platforms, but it's got to be able to stand on its own. And it's word of mouth. If it resonates, it is going to go across. My two films, they don't have any big backings, but finally had very, very big releases globally. So, I would, this is Miriam and my world. We have to have the confidence that the film has to stand on its own. But what happens is many times is there is a tendency to sensationalize because you can make quicker headlines and faster headlines. It happened with Daughters of Mother India. There was a big film which also focused on Nirbhaya, which got banned. We were released at the same time and, a lot unfolded. But because that other film had the rapist talking and everything, it moved faster, right? But I personally just feel it's a compromise to the movement. When you give this kind of platform to the rapists, this is something that we will not do. Even if it means, bigger headlines and bigger viewership, this is absolutely a no compromise. It does nothing for the movement. So that's a call that, Miriam or I will take, or for that matter, Rahul, on what kind of films he does or supports. It's a personal decision.
Miriam, your thoughts on this, and also if you can answer the question, actually none of you have answered this, about any content that's come out that you feel was sort of pushing the envelope further. And also, I mean, there's so many points to bring up, but even Rahul's sort of idea of, which is, I think it's a very important one, that when you've had so many years of sort of almost systemic injustice, you do need to overcompensate. In the West, I think they've brought in diversity laws. There's been such a strong sort of lobbying movement with the women at the forefront of it, pushing it. we've seen that. I mean, there was recently a show that came out, a series called Never Have I Ever. I don't know if any of you saw it. It's a real sort of teenage show, but it's got a Tamil girl, teenager front and center. It's in a Tamil family set in California. And it's, this hunky American Japanese guy who's objectified, not the girls. It's kind of really taken the sort of checking the boxes of representation quite a way forward. So, Miriam, firstly, have OTT platforms helped you? And secondly, do you think we need to overcompensate?
So I've been in the line for like decades now. So it's not that we envisioned there would be an OTT platform. And I was making my film kind of envisioning a normal sort of release, a broadcast release, festival circuit. We even went for a theatrical release for a documentary called The Rat Race. And it was simply because of the buzz it created before. I felt that it would be a film that, it would strike a chord with an audience who walks into the theater. And that was a gamble. But having done that, and it ran for like an extra week in Bangalore, it did better than the fiction releases for the week. And the kind of reviews that came is the reason why the OTT platforms, when they came, picked up that film and put it there. So it's not that you kind of have this clear idea of distribution, but you believe in your film and you're going to take those risks in getting it to the audience that you believe needs to see this film. So, and I've seen so many other filmmakers as well. There was this documentary film called The Insignificant Man, and it was about how AAP came up and the political party. And it was an inside view. And the way the filmmakers created it, the buzz that they generated, and the point in time that they launched it, they went for a YouTube release and it had more than 1 million views, I think, within a week. It pretty much went viral. Yeah. So I think as a filmmaker today, you have so many options. Even OTT, you have so many regional OTT platforms. So I've seen, for instance, Malayalam films that have done so well on, like, say, a niche stream, that finally Amazon Prime has pulled it up. The same film that they rejected, they're now kind of taking onto their platform. So I think that it's a gamble. It's not, there is no formula, and the fact that we have options is a good thing. It's like a filmmaker today has to be a bit of a creative entrepreneur. It's not just, you need to kind of also figure out who your audience is and take those risks to get it there.
Rahul, you mentioned the need to sort of redress the sort of injustice and the imbalance. How can that be done?
Well, certainly the way it was done with me. I mean, I was the fall guy for that, but that's fine. Certainly in that way. I must admit, I haven't thought about the ways in which this can be rectified. I would certainly stop at saying cast women and don't cast men. I mean, I would stop at that. But in terms of behind the scenes, why not? Workforce, why not? I mean, if you could make an argument for technicians going 50-50, right. That could be a very, very, and there are enough and more, as Miriam said, technicians across the country. I was speaking earlier, of course, Miriam knows about the Hindi film industry, but her point is well taken. I have a funny story to tell about representation, may I?
Please.
So there's a friend of mine who is half Indian and half Croatian. And no, half Indian, half Czech. He spent first 20 years of his life in England and the next 20 years in America. The only India he knows is the India when he comes on a holiday and lounges by the pool at the Taj kind of thing, right? Now with this representation thing, he's not getting any English films with English people or, with Americans to write. He's been given a film on cricket to write. He doesn't know the first thing about cricket. But because he's got this Indian name, everybody's giving him Indian stories, and he keeps calling me up and says, listen, tell me about cricket because I've got this cricket film to write. And, tell me about masalas and tandoori. And I mean, I've eaten it, but I've been to Trishna, and he's trying to tell me, he says, you're writing a script about the origin of Indian cuisine. He's like, that's all I'm getting. So anyway, that's just something that I thought you should hear about. And I have to share another funny bit. In the beginning, I think, was it you or was it, I forget who referred to the fact that women are skimpily dressed much more than men and all of that. And of course, it was meant seriously and I take it seriously, but I have to tell you the story to do with me. So my first film, English August, fully naked. Flash of frontal.
I remember that.
Otherwise, butt naked. And my father, obviously, I very proudly called him to see my film, and he saw it. Next film, Tuck Shuck, except for those black, those porn star speedos, again, in full, like showing off or whatever it is. And my father watches that film. My mother didn't watch it because she couldn't. She was dead, so it would be difficult for her to see it. Or maybe she did, who knows. And then the third film, Split Wide Open, butt naked. Totally naked, bending over, looking for something under the bed, cameras on top. You can see right up to my esophagus. Fourth film is Mr. and Mrs. Iyer. So finally, my sister, as she would ask my father, so what did you think of? And I was always called the boy. What did you think of the boy's performance? And my father said, well, at least he kept his clothes on this time. So I thought I was the one of the percentages on the other side, trying to create some equality about people's bodies being exploited. It's a joke. Nobody take offense. It's about me.
The other side of it, Udita, is that I worked on one fiction film, and that's Mathrubhumi, A Nation Without Women, directed by Manish Jha.
Yeah.
And we were all of like four women on this entire crew, which was like cast and crew, close to 100 people. So it's a very surreal sort of experience. And I had just gotten married. I remember I was so nervous about the whole space that I literally wore my Mangal Sutra, like as though it's like, those Dracula, and you wear like garlic to kind of keep away people. It's just, I think the feeling of insecurity, and it's something that you negotiate. It's just the lack of representation, the lack of, like, even if I'm in the direction department, I would be the only woman in the direction department. And the only other person is the actress, who is in a different world. And you're kind of having to, handhold her through the process. So for me, the whole fiction world and the skewed sort of gender dynamics, it's something that I would like to make a film about a film, I think, because it was so interesting, just like being this fly on the wall and always having this documentary sort of mindset, looking at this space itself. I think it's so different for Rahul, and it would be so different for me, just from the way that you're kind of entering the space.
Right.
Oh no, believe me, Miriam, on Purna, I had a special budget for women's loos.
Yeah.
I actually did research on the best portaloos in the country.
Yeah.
Even if they were imported, and I said every single location there have to be at least 2 portaloos for women. And much to the grumbling of my co-producer, I said we have to have an attendant who will clean the place, both portaloos, every 10 minutes for the 14 hours we are there on set. I mean, it was, believe me, this was a challenge, but so I'm just saying, if your eyes and ears are open to what's happening to women, then it's as what's not difficult, it's as challenging as it is for, I'm not saying as challenging, but it is challenging even for men to try and make that happen.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's like you have to kind of tune in to, it's empathy again, right? You literally have to put yourself in someone else's sort of shoes and figure out what is this workspace going to look like for them.
Yeah.
And I think even the fact that a film crew of 110 lands up in a small little Mofussil town or little village, it's surreal. It's the kind of the kind of waves and ripples and sort of commotion it creates in a small town, even in terms of like seeing a woman in jeans and a short, these are multiple realities. You think of the people on a film set itself, there are multiple realities of what India is right there. And
No,
the fact that they're going from
yeah, talking about, what Rahul, you just said about, what you had to do in Purna, and it was very challenging for you. I mean, in what I saw in reality, in Sunrise, those men who were trying to break the shackles, they paid a price. I mean, this farmer, the shame that he experienced for marrying the gang rape survivor, I mean, it was appalling. No, he was socially ostracized by the village for doing the right thing. The other village chief who was trying to get women involved in the politics has 153 cases against him filed by the villagers. So, it's when we are talking about, changing the narrative, both men and women will have to be very brave, to change this. And yes, it requires your craft, it requires your commitment, it requires compassion. There's a whole lot that goes into changing it, and men and women both will have to do it.
I've heard you say this, Vibha, about 4 times today,
Yeah.
about changing the narrative and changing the depiction. I'm intrigued, and we can have this conversation later. How does a documentary filmmaker decide to change the narrative when you're making a documentary?
The documentary filmmaker doesn't.
You have no control over it.
Absolutely. And I think that when the documentary filmmaker puts their point of view, then it's not the documentary. But when you see the people that you followed, who under the harshest conditions have done what they've done, it's awe-inspiring. When we saw, whether it was in Daughters of Mother India, whether it was the police, or we saw these men from Haryana, the unlikeliest corners, who did what they did, it was amazing, Rahul. Because
no, I don't think you've understood me. I was talking about how do you have control over changing a narrative in a documentary. I'm not questioning what your intent is.
No, it's not us.
You probably, I mean, if the guy turned around and said, I married this woman who was gang raped because I got 15 crores, how would you control that change in the narrative? You know what I mean?
No, but that is something you can't. I mean, would we follow that guy? No, but I'm saying those who did it, they are the ones who are changing the narrative.
So you would choose, So you would choose not to follow the guy.
Yes.
Because you would not be interested in making a documentary on that.
Absolutely.
You would not be open to letting what unfolds unfold, which is how I thought documentaries were made. Like whatever emerges.
Absolutely.
Not in your case.
Rahul, when Nirbhaya happened.
No, not in your case. You're saying if this absurd example I've given was the case, you would have stopped it and moved on to something.
Absolutely. In the case, there was the cup leader who was very difficult with us, but over time, something else unfolded out of him. The man who stopped me from filming, he changed. So he got, we just watched how things unfold. Same thing, Rahul, it is when Nirbhaya happened and we had access to the Delhi police. What is it that we picked up from the files? Did we want to focus on the rapist? Did we want to hear their point of view that she deserved it? No, that was a choice that we took as a team.
So obviously you editorialize in a documentary. I understand that to a certain extent, but here clearly the editorialization is something that takes precedence with some filmmakers over the let things unfold as they will kind of thing.
In our case, it was let things unfold, because when I went in search of the farmer, but then later on the film became about female infanticide, which was never the case. But when we went from village to village and saw an eerie absence of girls, the story takes another form. But we had gone to find this love story, and then Sunrise became something totally different.
And I have to say that, it's often that a powerful or a moving film fiction or non-fiction, will motivate viewers to participate, or it'll be a call to action. And I think that, I think with Sunrise, certainly that was one of the things that I got after watching it, that there was a call to action kind of feeling to it. And I think that was, part of its impact and its, sort of achievement as a very powerful documentary. I'm going to take some questions because we have tons. I'm going to start with one from Madhavanti. She says, she wants to ask the panelists, what is your take on gender equality in lower classes? Don't you think there is a huge gap in gender equality on screen and in reality? Anyone can start. Miriam?
Yeah, actually, the very first Mollywood film that was made, they couldn't get, as you know, in cinema, early cinema, it was difficult to get women to even act because it was considered something that was taboo. So someone from like one of the lower castes was recruited. Her name was PK Rosie, and she played the lead role. She played a Nair woman who is a higher caste. And once the film was released, there was such a backlash that she had dared to, one, occupy screen space, and two, that she had played the role of an upper caste, that she was literally driven out of the state. And she had to go into hiding. So today there's a film society called the PK Rosie Film Society that's been formed to remember her contribution to cinema. And I think that this is a caste equations in Kerala have changed considerably. There have been many social reform movements, and despite that, within, say, even the WCC, there is a lot of debate about representation. Anyone speaking English, even someone like me, has to realize that we are privileged, and how we use our privilege is what is in question. But no matter what, it's like there are that many stories that need to be told. And till I totally agree with what Rahul said, that somewhere to correct this ratio, not just with gender, but also caste and class, there has to be some systemic provision for this.
There's a question from an anonymous attendee. Are women filmmakers more successful in making women-centric films? Anyone? Any of you?
What would you call Bandit Queen? A woman-centric film?
Absolutely.
What would you call, trying to think, 15 Park Avenue? Woman-centric film? What, Coco? And Aparna? I'm just saying, one was made by a man, one was made by a woman. So,
So that's not the case then. We don't think that women filmmakers are more successful in making women-centric films.
I think everyone has their own sensibility as a filmmaker. In fact, my early films were very strongly macho films, I would say. I did, the Stuntmen of Bollywood, which was to look at the stunt industry. It was a sort of a thriller documentary that went into this very male world. But I think the lensing and the way that I put out the film has a women's sensibility. So I think, I put out something about a very macho world, but with a different kind of a sensibility. And I would say the same for Rat Race, where you're seeing rat killers at night going out with a torch and a stick and, bludgeoning rats literally. But you're listening to their stories about migration and being in Mumbai, the city of dreams, and they moonlight as rat killers and they're chasing their dreams by day. And that is a story that I think I could tell. So I don't see it as, I think that women who even tell macho stories are doing it differently. And it's not necessary that when they're taking up a women-centric subject, they're doing justice to it. They can have the most patriarchal lens as well. Women can be supporters of like very regressive values as well. We've seen it in our popular culture. So I think those are all sort of generalizations.
Right. I like this question. Can you name any recent policies that have helped in the film and entertainment industry that have helped in bridging the gender gap? Can you think of any?
Policy, did you say?
Yes.
Yeah, so I was telling you about the film financing that came through the state, Kerala state government, for two fresh filmmakers who are women. They've been given the chance to, like their scripts were basically went through a process and juried, and they've been greenlit. So those are two films that we're going to see, and that's at a policy level. And I think if you want systemic change, if you don't have reservation, also you can have incentives.
Yeah.
You can have incentives to have a certain percentage of your crew who are women. You can have tax sort of incentives as well. So there are different ways of doing it.
Right. Rahul, do you know of any policies? I don't think
No.
so. I can't think of any other.
Mhm.
Okay, there's an interesting question here from Lakshmi Lingam on how do you address the gender gap in remuneration of actors, and how do you prioritize the remuneration to technical staff members behind the screen? Because a lot of them are not unionized.
Would you pay two female actors who have the same length of role, but one was a superstar and one wasn't the same?
You mean for the same length, in the same film with equal parts?
Yeah.
So there
But one is a superstar, and clearly that's the person who people will come because, they don't know the other person.
Mm-hmm.
Would you pay them the same?
No.
No.
Probably not.
Why? They're both women.
And one is a superstar and the other isn't?
Correct?
Yeah, so you will pay more for the superstar.
Why?
Because of the pull.
So you believe that your film is going to make more money because of the superstar than it would than from the other actor who's a woman also, correct?
Okay.
So then in that case, if that is what you believe, Vibha, and there's no right or wrong here, in that case, if it happened to be a man, would you pay the man more?
And the roles are equal?
Yeah, you're saying bums on seats, right? You're saying who puts more bums on seats? Roles are equal, man, woman, man is a superstar, woman is a newcomer. Would you pay the man more?
Yeah.
But how does it look?
Experience counts for something.
Yeah, I would say if one is
Experience,
a newcomer and one...
She's not talking about experience. It's about, I've spent 10 rupees on making this film. How can I get the money back? Whose face do I put on the poster? Who do I talk about?
It's commerce. Commerce, economics, all of that plays a big part.
So when I did Chameli with Kareena, of course she got paid way more than me.
Yeah.
Because she's the one who's going to get people into the audience, into the cinema hall. Certainly 10 times more than I could, right? So when that reverses, what happens? You see, this is the argument that I hear a lot being made nowadays, but I keep telling them when I can that, look, you're looking at it like an art. You started this entire conversation earlier by saying that we have freedom in documentary, on stage, on the street, to do exactly what we want because there's very little money at stake. And I don't mean documentaries, the Miriam kind. I mean, when there is less money at stake, values can be upheld, or you can even push for things to be done. But when there is money at stake and it becomes a business, you're basically looking at how can I at least not lose money from this, but hopefully make some money from this. And you will do whatever you can to get there. The question is that excuse enough or not?
Because
everybody
has been challenged, right? Because people like Vidya Balan have kind of taken up these roles.
No, Miriam, you're making a separate point. You're saying, can a woman carry a film? I'm saying, of course she can.
Yeah.
No,
but earlier there
I'm
was
saying when a man
that itself is not feasible. That it is not commercially viable.
I'm not disputing your point. I'm saying it's a separate point.
Yeah.
Can Kangana carry a film in Queen? Of course she can, right? I get it. But the question here is, when there are two women playing the same length of role and one is a superstar and one is a newcomer, would you pay them equally or would you pay the superstar more?
But if you have a woman who's as big a star as the man, does she still get paid the same as the man? That is actually...
Of course she should. If it's an
should,
economic
but she
argument.
doesn't.
But if she
If it's an economic argument,
someone
then
like
some
Revati,
nonsense.
who's acted in 124 films, even if she was cast, she would probably not get as well paid by someone who is like done half the number of films as her.
And therefore, it's a no-brainer that that's wrong. There's
Yeah,
no question about it.
also, Rahul, in terms of length, the length will not be given to the woman, even if she is an equal superstar. The man will still get a chunk of it.
And that is also unacceptable. But I was trying to actually posit a scene where this happens, and then you're saying, oh, hang on 1 second. I'm actually in favor of the economic argument. Therefore, whenever I criticize somebody for paying the man more, am I criticizing gender, or am I actually not accepting the fact that this guy puts more bums on seats than all these other people in the film?
No, I think your argument about economics is definitely a criteria. It's commercial cinema at the end of the day.
That's it. That's
Yeah.
the point I
It
made.
is commercial, but it's also a crowd. It's also competence. It's not gender. I mean, supposing someone's a newcomer and someone is more established, they've proven themselves in the box office. It comes down to that. So they're getting paid based on experience, competence, deliverables, everything.
No, they're getting paid on the economic pulling potential. Incorrect.
Which
They can be.
which
That
comes
they're
down
getting
to
paid on the
deliverables.
economic pulling potential.
Yeah,
So it's not
they
about
can
competence.
deliver.
Gender parity is like we can pay parity is of like one whole
Hey,
panel
let's
right
go to
there.
the next question because we're
running out of time. So
Yeah.
Arun has a question, which is, when depicting gender discrimination, exploitation, violence in films and shows, is it important or necessary to have a happy resolution?
Can I take this one?
Please.
No, I think what's more important than a happy resolution is, I think everyone has to come to their own moment of realization when they watch the injustice. Leave it to the viewer to decide what is right or wrong. And we have seen in this whole inequality, there are no fairy tale endings.
Mm.
So, we've got to show it the way it is. Sunrise did not have a happy ending, but leave it to the viewer on what they want to decide with it. So I think it's more important on that aspect than just having a happy ending.
There are a couple of questions which actually, and they're very important. We've talked about gender as very binary, men and women. But, what about representation of other genders? For instance, transgenders, non-binary, LGBTQ. Today, there are, so many definitions. What is the take of the panelists on that? I know we're like a million miles away from there in terms of equity, but...
What's the question, Eugene?
About about representation of other genders, the non-binary, the transgenders.
I mean, it's non-existent. What kind of other answer can we give you? It's non-existent. It just doesn't. It will happen because now society has started saying, "What the hell is going on?" Right?
Yeah, but it's very important. Yeah.
But Udita,
sorry.
Sorry, go ahead. No,
Sorry,
please.
go ahead.
No, please.
Go ahead. I
No.
interrupted. Sorry.
No, not at all. Please. I'll wait.
Miriam, say.
So yeah, this year I had a really beautiful experience of being a jury on the Kashish LGBTQ film festival. And the quality of films was really mind-blowing, really mind-blowing. So I think that there are no dearth of good stories and talented filmmakers. It's a question of like, how much will these be shown? Where will they again have the same challenges that all filmmakers who are doing what they are in their languages or in their specific ecosystems to get it out to like a bigger audience? But I was really moved by the quality of films that I saw.
Right. Rahul, go ahead.
I was quickly going to make a point to the previous question, which you thought. The function of great art is to sensitize and awaken.
Yeah.
It's not to make you happy.
Yeah.
But the happiness you feel when you come out of a beautiful piece of art, painting, music, whatever it is, although it might not be happy, is you feel purified. If only for a few moments. The world is purer. It's not happier. It's truer. It's purer. It's more concentrated. It's more vivid. That's what great art should do.
Yeah, Rahul, you've said it so beautifully.
Yes.
That's exactly what the aim for a film should be, and especially on this issue. Absolutely.
Should I take a couple more questions?
Sure.
There's, Maliha Siddiqui from Kolkata. Okay, this one, I'd like each of you to answer this, please. What are some famous stereotypes that you personally hate? And there are plenty of stereotypes in our
The
films.
sacrificial mom.
Mere paas maa hai, that maa. Rahul?
Where did that mother and son thing come from? I mean, the Greeks, do we have to blame the Greeks for that? I don't know, man. It's just, yeah, so many. It's just, there's a whole bag full of them. And you just open the bag and they'll come flying out at you. Yeah, I think for me, the mother and son one was, especially because I was so close to my father, I didn't quite get it. I mean, I loved my mom, but she was, all those tough chicks. You had to win her love, and that was great. But my dad, I mean, he was, it was a walkover. It was fantastic.
Vibha?
Oh, the one that I hate is the man who's got the whole meaning of man all wrong. I saw a lot of them around where, women were just meant to be there. So really about redefining who a real man is. So hate that stereotype of that alpha male. It's all wrong.
And now that Asad is back on screen, I think that's my cue to stop.
The alpha male has come.
Yes.
Putting an end to all this nonsense talk about gender equality. Come on. Smash your fist on the table.
Take over, Asad. Take us home.
All right. Thank you guys for this wonderful session. I think it's my bad. I was pulled up for this, that I didn't have representation of LGBTQ and, talk about those issues in this. But, the topic by itself is so big. There are so many issues to cover. So I said we have to have a phase 2 or a, 2.0 to this discussion. I mean, here we are working with friends. Vibha has been an all-time old friend from New York, and also we've launched her film. Udita, we've worked on so many projects together. Rahul has been at the Opera House several times. And Miriam, you can run from Avid, but you can never hide. So, you'll be back, I'm sure. But no, thank you guys for such a great discussion. And Udita, for jumping in. Appreciate it, and so skillfully moderating the session. And to our partners, the US Consul General in Mumbai, Yoon, Almitra, thank you for reaching out, and thank you for always collaborating with us. We have many, Avid has programs quite frequently, but do look out for the next one. Our next session next Thursday is on the future of luxury, part of our sustainability series, which is on the 29th. To find out more, just stalk us on social media, as I tell people, or follow our website or our handles. But until then, stay happy, stay safe, and remember that learning never stops. Thank you very much, and have a wonderful evening. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.